Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Big Six Podcast. Will Brinson here, joined by Ryan Wilson and Brady Quinn. Unfortunately, under pretty somber circumstances, Damar Hamlin, a Bills defensive player, young man, is in critical condition in the hospital, and the Bills and Bengals game on Monday Night Football was suspended. So we're going to try and sort of work through this. How you guys doing?
Doing all right. I think, I guess I'll start up first, but I think for anyone who was watching last night, obviously an incredibly horrific moment. And I don't care if you're a fan and you have never played the game, or if you're a player and a coach and you've been around it and you've seen, guys fall down before and be taken off on stretchers and all of that. I can attest to this. I've never seen anything like that where a player, one, goes to the ground, gets back up, and then collapses like that, and then has to be literally resuscitated, has to have CPR performed on him for 9 minutes. So obviously thoughts and prayers are with, everyone involved. I mean, obviously not just Hamlin, but I think his family, obviously the Bills organization, all the players involved, T. Higgins too. I'm sure he's experiencing this different than everyone else being a part of that play. So just thoughts and prayers with everyone out there.
Yeah, no, those are important words, and it's tough, and it's tough for anyone, no doubt about it. But it becomes tougher for me personally when you guys know this, when you have kids, and then your sort of perspective changes. And the reports that Damar's mom was in the stands, and I mean, I would imagine family members, and Brady, you can certainly attest to this, are nervous every time their son steps on a football field, because it can always be a serious injury, but no one could conceive of something like this. And it's hard to wrap your brain around. And when you become a parent, it's less about you and more about keeping your people safe. And when things are out of your control, it becomes incredibly difficult. And there are a lot of things that you can control, and there's some things that you can't control. And just the chances of this happening feels like 1 in a trillion. And you feel, you feel sadness for Damar and his family, and for his teammates and Brady. You've seen players have head injuries and get knocked out cold, and teammates are incredibly upset by that. This was taken to another level, and it happened quite quickly, because to your point, you never see a player make a tackle, get up, and then collapse, and then no one knows what's going on. I think,
and I would just say, the quickly thing I think is really kind of, it's not an interesting angle. It's just we went to commercial break, and no one was injured, right? Or somebody had gone down to the ground at a quick injury break, right? And you come back and he's on a stretcher, and then there's 3 commercial breaks, and you see, I mean, like Josh Allen is a tough dude, and he looks like he has seen something that has shaken him to his core, and multiple Bills players are crying, and Joe Buck doesn't even know doesn't have a good angle about it, because they're trying to be respectful and keep the cameras away. And so all that, Ryan, I think, like it was almost like it was watching it unfold. You almost didn't even it was hard to fathom what exactly was going on.
Well, and I think as a former player, you become callous to a certain degree with a play like we saw this past week with Josh Sweat, which is also incredibly scary, right? I mean, there's a thought that, when Josh Sweat goes down like that, everyone's sitting there for a moment just saying, I hope he can move his arms and his legs and his extremities. And then we all of a sudden start playing the game again. I mean, imagine what it feels like to be an Eagles defender who's probably made similar plays, tackles before throughout their football life, and wondering, am I going to be the next guy that this happens to? In an instance like this, I mean, no one's ever seen, in most cases, someone even be administered CPR. And for starters, thank you and God bless all the medical professionals who were there, all 20 people who were able to save his life. But the reality is no player, no coach, no one's prepared for that. Seeing a guy who literally his heart stops on the field in a moment's notice like that, and then you've got to have someone rush out in the field and resuscitate him. I think anyone who's had maybe a grandparent or a parent who's had to be rushed off the hospital in an EMS and has witnessed something similar to that, you understand the sense of urgency that the EMS has when they get there, knowing that this is literally a life and death scenario. We talk about that as players, former players, but it never really truly comes to the forefront until something like this. And I think that's what makes it so horrifying, so shocking for a lot of those players to try to process. And I know watching that, I was just thankful for the leadership of Zach Taylor and Sean McDermott to be able to, as leaders of men, say, we're not playing this game. Like, no one's in the right frame of mind. This is not the priority right now. I don't care what the NFL says, 5-minute warm up or whatever else they had said. I mean, I'll start by saying this. Obviously, having worked, with guys like Joe Buck and Troy Aikman and the folks at ESPN did a tremendous job covering this, they would not make the statement that there would be a 5-minute warm up and try to resume the game unless they were told that by someone within the NFL.
Joe Buck didn't fly off the cuff on the 5-minute thing. Somebody told him 5 minutes and we're coming back. And then Troy Vincent later said that would be preposterous. I think it's probably just the built-in protocols and somebody, like with the Josh Sweat thing, it's like, you have 5 minutes and we're back up. I mean, right? It's got to be that.
Well, to a degree, but I think this should make the NFL, Roger Goodell in particular, really go back and look at how they're handling these situations, whether it's Josh Sweat or Damar Hamlin in this case, and what has transpired. Because there does need to be a moment of reflection to understand, like, is this guy okay? I mean, again, I can tell you countless practices where a guy's torn his Achilles, torn his ACL, Riverside it. Like, in the next minute or two, you're just turning the drill around, going the opposite way, why this guy's career or season may be over. And like, there's nothing that you take into account the fact that you've got a player, a friend who's going through agony and going through an injury. I mean, just the entire process of how injuries are handled in the first place, whether it's amongst teams or in the NFL by and large. So I would hope the NFL would say, if that was your protocol and you communicated that to any network, whether it be ESPN or anyone else, you'd go back and look through that again as far as how you want to handle it. But again, credit Zach Taylor and Sean McDermott, because they seem to take that leadership role and put the NFL in its place and say, no, we're not playing this game. This is the least of our priorities at this moment.
Brady, you said a couple of things that I want to circle back to. You talked about the medical professionals and what they did. I saw Mike Ryan, who is an NFL trainer for 26 years, and I think he works for NBC now on Sunday Night Football. He said that the Bills medical staff was out there 25 seconds after Damar went down. So they were out there immediately. And he said that athletic trainers, they constantly practice crucial emergency drills like this. So even though Roger Goodell and the higher-ups perhaps were unprepared for this, and on some level you can understand that, it's good to know that the medical staff, they train for such situations. And to follow up on your other point about you might have seen a family member or someone in an urgent situation, and someone mentioned this last night, and I think it's great advice, and I'm taking them up on it. Google where to get a CPR class near you and take a CPR class near you, because there are going to be situations where you're going to feel helpless. And if you're trained in such a situation, it could be at a restaurant, it could be at a family event, it could be wherever, you could save someone's life or someone could save your life. So that's something easy you can do to try to help out when you see something like this happen that, let's be honest, 99.99% of us were unprepared for.
Yeah, and you might be the 0.1% is the folks who got on the field and did that. I know, Wilson, you and Brady, you probably did the same thing. When you have children, you have to take you usually do a CPR class. If my son actually turned 9 today, but I wouldn't know. I would not feel like super comfortable. It's been 9 years. I'm not sure I would know exactly what to do. So I think you're right. Find out where to get a CPR, update that, and hopefully help someone out. We don't we don't know what we don't know what the medical status of Damar Hamlin is. That's one of the things that's been really tough about this as well. And obviously it's just from a coverage standpoint, like trying to talk about it and provide provide information, is that we don't have any information. The Cincinnati hospital had a press conference scheduled for around midnight-ish last night on Monday night. They canceled that and said no further updates. And the Damar Hamlin's family has not, that's perfectly fine, but there haven't been an update. The NFL declined to give a medical update on his status on their conference call around midnight on Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday. And so that's made it difficult. I don't want to speculate on what caused it, but it does seem to, I think it's just, I'm not sure of the exact terminology, but like the helmet hit of T. Higgins to his chest, it seemed like sort of a like blunt force cardio trauma, and maybe like that's what he's dealing with, and that's what sparked the cardio incident, and that's why it is like a, it is such a rare, freakish incident for that to happen, right, Brady? Like you don't see that very often on the field.
No, you don't. You really don't. And I think that played a role in it. Maybe this then calls into question us better equipping our players with protection around vital organs like that. I mean, obviously we have rib protectors. We have shoulder pads that protect our shoulders for the most part and our chest to a degree, but they could probably do a better job. And I think that's the hard thing for a lot of players. When the NFL really does a good job at trying to get you to wear the protective gear you're supposed to. There's fines that are implemented and so forth if you don't, and it's only in your best interest. And I think there's a certain style and a certain way players like to feel and the way they go out and play in the game. But this might even call into question the way we look at shoulder pads and how they're designed to maybe do a better job of protecting the chest. Maybe even potentially an undergarment that does that as well. If you don't like having that on your shoulder pads, whatever the case may be, I really feel like from all angles of this, whether it's from equipment, medical staff, from I guess the way the NFL from a PR standpoint and the teams have handled this, I think it's going to make you question everything. Even Ryan bringing up a great point and saying that was one of my first thoughts too when I woke up this morning. It's like, man, could I administer CPR to any of my kids, or like I've got to coach my daughter's soccer team tomorrow night? Can I administer if something was to happen in that moment? I don't have my certification. I have in the past, but obviously that's expired. So I think it makes you not second guess, but really want to reevaluate how you're prepared for anything like this moving forward.
Absolutely. And so that again, like that is just sort of the hard part of like we can't, like, we don't. You don't want to speculate on whatever the medical situation is because we just don't know, and we haven't got any updates. And we're recording this as of Tuesday around 1:30 p.m. Hamlin. There's never done a silver lining at all, but I mean, like, it is incredible to see what's happened with, his charity. He has a GoFundMe set up where he's wanted to try to raise $2,500 for a toy drive. As of last check, it was over $4 million. It's at $4.3 million right now, which is just incredible to see. And I mean, like you look at these, it's like $15,000 donations. I don't know if you can verify anybody on GoFundMe, but Andy Dalton is listed on there as like a $3,000 donation. Christian McCaffrey was listed on there. There's the flood of, and they've actually changed the picture to recently a picture of Damar, and they're going to use it to help the community, help the Buffalo, help his charities. It's kind of remarkable to see how that sort of occurred in the way, in the real time as this was all happening.
Yeah, I mean, the silver lining of that is fantastic to see that sort of support. Beyond that though, I think the biggest thing right now is just hopefully that he's able to come out from this and be okay. I mean, clearly still in critical condition, and not knowing what caused it, not knowing what his future looks like, just walking around as a normal human, let alone the game of football. So as great as all that stuff is, until we hear that he's okay and he's going to be okay moving forward, it's tough. I mean, all that stuff's awesome, but it's just still, I have such a heavy heart, and it was just going back to the whole NFL and even contemplating how long it took them to actually cancel the game or postpone the game, I think is the proper term they used. I talked about this early on radio, but I was a part of a team that had a tragic event the day before a game. And I remember thinking back to that day last night and just how
it's about 9 years ago.
Yeah. It would have been 9 years ago. Or 2012. So I guess maybe, it
was 2013 because I remember when it happened. Oh, was it?
It was December 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it's all right. Typical Will.
No, I just remember. I remember being in the house. Okay.
Well, anyway, I remember where I was. But just experiencing that, driving in that day, finding out what had taken place, what had transpired, and being in shock, and seeing other players who were also in shock, were hysterical. For losing a friend, a teammate, guy you felt like was a brother. And there was no question of whether or not we were going to play that game the next day. And thinking back on that moment and how insignificant that game felt, how what had transpired, how he had a daughter that was now without its mom and its dad, it weighed so heavily, not only just the next day, but the rest of that season. And I hope as we've pushed as a society to do a better job of acknowledging mental health, that was something that I remember that following year when I saw with the Seahawks in the offseason. They had a sports psychologist named Michael Gervais, who's still there, does a tremendous job. And as we started like our kind of initial conversation getting into it, like it kind of came up and just asking like about my history and my past. And I was in such a bad place after that season because of what had transpired that I didn't realize I was still kind of carrying that burden with me. And a lot of the things that kind of were going through my mind of, what could you have done differently to prevent it? I in those situations where I'm watching that particular play, I think some of his teammates might be wondering, hey, maybe I could have seen something sooner. What did I miss? What did I not catch? Maybe there was a play before, something that caused this or attributed to it. That's kind of where my mind always, went to when I, thought about a tragic event is what could I have done differently to change the outcome? And so I remember thinking though, how, that the NFL just moved on and we go play that game. And I'm not sure anyone was in the right state of mind on our coaching staff, on our team to play that game, let alone probably the rest of the season. And obviously it was a tough season as it was already. And it wasn't like that made things any easier.
A couple things. It's funny that you mentioned the players wondering what they could have done, because a few weeks ago, Nelson Aguilar for the Patriots was waving frantically when Devontae Parker had a concussion and wondering where the people whose job it was supposed to be to watch the concussions, where they were. But that speaks to your point about the brotherhood. We've heard we've heard BMAC, we've heard Ryan Harris, your former teammate, Leger Dujabal, all on CBS talk about the brotherhood aspect of it. And I think one of the important takeaways for people is that this is a gladiator sport for fans, right? They don't think that football players are humans because that's not how they look at them. And I think this has brought some humanity to that. And you also mentioned, your time with the Chiefs. And actually, that was one of the first things I thought about. And I looked up because I remember I didn't watch it. I couldn't watch it today, but I watched it a few years ago. The speech you gave the next day as a 28-year-old was insane in that it was so on point. And it just reminds you that young people are smart and thoughtful and passionate. And they're not just, as an old person, you look down and say, okay, are we going to be okay with this next generation? And you felt okay when the words that you spoke, and you can Google them if you want to read them, because if I read them here, I'd probably break down, but it just speaks to, the leadership that you provided, and you weren't asked that, you were thrust into that role, and people needed to hear that at that moment. And part of me just sort of armchair, and it probably that was part of the burden that you carried also going forward, that sort of thing. And I think you're exactly right, Brady, about the mental health aspect of this. And I give a lot of credit to players recently who have spoken out about it. Dak Prescott's spoken out about it. Marshawn Lynch has spoken out about it. And that's something that when I was growing up and playing sports in the 90s that you didn't bring up. There was no way you weren't tough or whatever the accusation was going to be. Man, let me tell you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with, as Marshawn likes to say, getting your mentals right, because it can burden you, and it can burden you to such a degree that you can't function. And it could be something interior, it could be something exterior, like a teammate getting hurt, family member dying, and those are things there's no shame in it. And if anyone says there's shame in it, you have to push through it and find a way, because at the end of the day, it's the mental part of it is a huge component, and you just don't know how something like this can affect you. And the idea of playing a football game sounds absolutely ludicrous at this point, given what people have gone through.
The NFL, actually, we just got, not to bring the news into it, but we got the tweet from the Buffalo Bills. Damar Hamlin spent last night in the intensive care unit, remains there today in critical condition at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. We are grateful and thankful for the outpouring of support we received thus far. That's the only update on him. Tom Pelissero tweeted that after speaking with both teams and the NFLPA leadership, Roger Goodell informed the clubs today that the Bills-Bengals game will not be resumed this week. The NFL has made no decision regarding the possible resumption of the game at a later date. I don't know how that would work. That's it for it won't be played this week. They won't try and force it in on Wednesday. Won't try and play. There's no Thursday night football. They won't try and play it on Thursday and force them to play a short week. And I think to what you guys just said about the ability of asking a player to you're asking a team to go back out there with so much, with one of your brothers and like in the hospital and unknown about what will happen moving forward is like, I mean, kudos to the NFL for doing the right thing that you don't see them do very often, Brady. And as you noted, that they maybe didn't do 10 years ago.
No, again, like I said, it eventually came to the right decision last night. Whether or not social media and the outcry from a lot of players and fans and folks, pressured them into that, whatever the case may be, they eventually came to the right decision. And this is another right decision. Look, we went through a year in COVID where we figured out how to play games not on your typical schedule. They can figure this out. It's the NFL. The TV networks can figure this out. I think the only maybe shining light through all of this, and again, hoping that Damar Hamlin comes out of everything just fine, is that maybe this caused us to pause and reflect and start to like really go back and find out what our true priorities are and how we handle these sorts of situations moving forward. And again, just piggybacking off of Ryan, like mental health in particular, and continuing to have that conversation. Because I think look, whether it's the NFLPA and the way they prepare players for post-career, or just, guys and how they kind of see themselves as that warrior, it's a really, really hard thing to mentally get in the headspace you need to go play in an NFL game. I was reminded of that calling game this past Sunday, just going down the sidelines, walking around. Then I jokingly made a comment during the game as I watched JJ Watt warm up for the second to last time in his career. And I was like, God, man, I don't miss that. Like I loved playing. I loved everything about it. Since I was a little kid, throwing a football, seeing a spiral, like something about that to me was like mystified. I loved seeing it just spiral through the air and hit the intended target. And then you see a guy like that who just try to do the best he can to prevent you from doing that. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot what this was like. And it made me, as I was walking up to the booth, go, yeah, I forgot. You had to kind of hit a switch, and like you had to look at yourself differently and think of yourself differently, whether you were in actuality that player or not, that tough or not. You sure had to think you were. You sure had to think you were that good or that tough. And so, it's that sort of mentality that some players have a really hard time being able to switch it off, or when they come to an injury or a circumstance where they're not okay out there, they try to fight through it because that's what they're taught to do. And meanwhile, it could end up impacting their long-term livelihood and ability to enjoy life. So these are always moments where, again, I feel like hopefully everything works out with Damar Hamlin, and he'll be just fine from all of this. But hopefully it does also cause us to pause and kind of reflect on how we handle these circumstances.
The NFL also added in their statement that was just released that the league has not made any changes to the Week 18 regular season schedule. We will continue to provide, meaning as in they currently have not changed anything. Is that that's the thing too, is like, I mean, I get, don't go back out there the next day or like, whatever, but like is that, I mean, was Week 18 enough of a buffer? Is that, and there's probably, maybe it's not. I mean, and it maybe depends on what happens.
This will be something that they never forget. I wasn't obviously there to witness what happened with Javon Belcher that day. There were people who were. One of our colleagues, Scott Pioli, was. One of my former head coaches that I absolutely love to this day, Romeo Cornell, was. I can only imagine how that could keep them up or impact them.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we went to the funeral. I got to see him after the fact. It wasn't a closed casket. And that will be forever etched in my mind as far as seeing him and what that looked like and understanding what exactly transpired and took place and putting those pieces together. And I think that was one of the hardest things to be able to move forward, move past. It's something that, to this day, I'm probably too responsive to people, more so than I should be. I probably should be more patient, more thoughtful when people reach out and I respond because of that event, and thinking that I wish I could have done something or seen something before that with Javon to help him. So that event never took place in the first case. I was literally lined up across from him every day in stretch lines. And from all accounts, like, I didn't think he was battling something internally. And, so I've always now since then kind of had that hardwired in my mind. Like, you never know when someone might need something from you. And those words might be the difference in them making a decision, of them going over the edge and something catastrophic happens. So these young men, these coaches, none of them will ever get past this. I mean, this will be something that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. And I think that's the toughest part, is how you go about managing then those emotions, those feelings moving forward through an NFL season that we all know the reality is the NFL will continue to move on. And that's, a lot of people probably feel like it's hard to listen to those words, but that's the reality. I learned that as a broadcaster one time when my play-by-play partner was late coming down, and I was like, what would happen if something happened to him? And they're like, oh, they just grabbed someone else before the game. And I thought to myself, I mean, how would that work? Like, my emotions, feelings aren't taken into account if we just lost someone, and I've got to just do the game and work with someone else. So I just kind of going back to the initial point, I hope people are able to kind of pause and reflect on this, because this is something that they'll never forget, and I don't know how that'll change things moving forward. I mean, obviously the NFL schedule has a week to work with. There is no Pro Bowl. There's 2 weeks before the Super Bowl. If they really wanted to, they could bump things back.
For sure. And then look, the reality of the situation is that the Bills-Bengals game on Monday night was one of the biggest games of the season, and it had massive implications for the playoffs and for seeding in the AFC in particular, and then the AFC North division. And I only bring that up because if the the outcome of that game will probably determine who gets the 1 seed. And if you're a Bills player, if you're a Bills coach, if you're not only is it beneficial from a competitive standpoint to have that week off, I think from a mental standpoint, it would be pretty substantial to get a week off before the playoffs to pause and to get a mental break, to get your mentals right, as Wilson said. Additionally, if they decided that the game is a tie and just the game's over, and the NFL has to decide at some point, because if the Chiefs win on Saturday, if the game's a tie, the Chiefs win on Saturday, then the Bills could just rest their guys in week 18 or forfeit the game and say, we're just gonna go and play in the playoffs. And so I think, and for mental reasons, and so that aspect of it is like, it's not, I'm not comfortable talking about it, but it is a part of the equation that the league has to deal with, because it moves forward. Like the NFL is going to play week 18, and it is, unfortunately, it's not far around the corner.
No, you're right. I mean, it's the conversations that are happening in the league office. It's the conversations that, Sean McDermott's having, Zach Taylor's having, with their coaching staff, their front office, their organization right now. That's the reality of it, is they understand that even in all of this, there still will have to be a season that comes to a conclusion for the regular season, and the playoffs will ensue. And, they're going to have to kind of figure out a way to work through this and get beyond this. So, those obviously everything's still up in the air. The NFL has the flexibility to do what they need to do. I don't know that you need to find a way of making this game work in some way and manipulating the schedule. I think what you talked about is whether or not you just give them both a tie, or you start to base things off winning percentage, however you go about doing it, whatever the case may be for seeding purposes. Like, it just seems like pretty trivial to talk about right now, but the NFL will find a way of figuring this out.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the thing that matters the most at all. And I would guess that the Bills players would even be like, what, we don't. They probably wouldn't even. They would just we'll take the L and move on if we have to, because nobody wants to get back on that field and to think about what happened there in Cincinnati. I'm trying to think, anything else that you guys want to add? I mean, it's just very difficult, because it's still very much up in the air with Damar Hamlin's health status. I think that the Bills providing an update with nothing, it hadn't really gone either way. And any update is a good update, I think, because you're hearing something. It makes you when you don't hear any updates from the hospital, from the team, to me that's more worrisome than getting information provided by the league and by the teams.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Ryan, how you feel, but I'm not going to speculate right now. I just, I'll be thinking about him, praying for him and all that. And I hope everyone else does the same out there. And as Ryan said earlier, for those that have the opportunity to do so, go get CPR certified. You never know if you can save someone's life.
Yep. Get CPR certified, get your mentals right. Talk to people. And thank you very much for listening. Thanks for watching. Prayers up to Damar Hamlin. And of course, we'll be back at some point to continue our coverage. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. For Brady and Ryan, I'm Brinson. See you guys later.